UNESCO, whose work explores how technology can make learning more accessible, equitable, and effective. He's currently leading the Gateways to Public Digital Learning Initiative, a joint effort by UNESCO and UNICEF to help ensure public education extends into digital and online spaces. This is really important work, and Mark's research has sparked real change in the past. Most notably, his report, I would blush if I could, has influenced companies like Apple to rethink how digital assistants express gender. So, welcome, Mark. And we are now into the second segment of our discussion, or the last segment. Actually, I lost thread. Like, was it the second or the third segment? The last segment of our conversation, and I've been having so much fun, discussing this a topic with you. Can tech deliver justice and AI and the future of learning? And you have done so much great work in this space, and we are really grateful that you are able to like speak about some of that work with us. And we hope that it's just the beginning of the discussion that we have, and some of the collaborations that are coming in the future. You have spoken about education as a living, breathing, human experience that require all five senses rather than just sight or vision and hearing, which we have sort of that's how it has been minimized through different episodes of not just the pandemic, but also with the emerging technologies, also with this like profit driven infrastructure, digital infrastructure that are pushing us to minimize educational experiences and use like a couple of senses instead of those all five. And I really loved that analogy, and I want to like sort of know want to know a little bit more about like your experience with education, like personal experience with education. Like we all went to schools, we all went to not all of us, but some of us went to college, and some of us also went to grad school. Education, even though it is a basic human right, we both agree on that. But higher education, or exposure to certain kinds of education, and being able to travel, being able to serve on a organization like UNESCO, that definitely is a privilege. Like, could you tell us a little bit about your personal journey into this space?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe in public education, and I think part of that does trace to my own, educational experience. I grew up in a very small town, and I went to schools where sort of everybody in the community went to the same school. Very children from very privileged families, children from very underprivileged families, and kind of looking back on that, I think that was a very, sort of healthy experience. You got to sort of know the people and the families that you lived with, and sort of encountered a lot of different realities, folks from very different backgrounds. And I think that is, really at the essence of what helps to, um, establish, people and communities to understand one another and are able to live together harmoniously and in peace. UNESCO's core mission is to build peace and justice through education. And so, well, of course, having very advanced skills and other things are very good. You know, at least the way that UNESCO looks at education is how can it be a force, for peace and upholding and respecting human rights. So anyway, it's a sort of particular lens, but I do think that different people's educational experiences. That's what's unique about the field of education. Everybody's an education expert at some level because everybody, or many people, participated in informal education in some way, so have sort of opinions about how it works and doesn't work. And I know that other people went through education that was really troubled or other things, and often take a sort of different view of public education, that it doesn't work, it's dysfunctional or other things. But at least my own experience with that was was a really positive one, and I think is what a lot of people envision for a sort of model for public education, a sort of a site of of learning how to, you know, come into a community, come into a culture, and get along with people who are outside of my family, and so on and so forth. So not sure if that answers your sort of question, but I do think that, as you said, our backgrounds do inform our sort of view of things.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't think I don't think I'm particularly unique in believing in public education. I think that most people do believe in public education. Even the most sort of people do believe in giving folks equal opportunities, and what a better way to give people equal opportunities than to ensure that everybody has access to a sort of high quality education, and that everybody has opportunities to sort of find their strengths and realize their potential.
I love how you're centering public education, public tech, as well as like human touch, in this discussion. And I think it's really important to go back to this idea of, this original idea of like education as a human experience, and being able to be human in this system and not just interact with tech. And I appreciate you talking specifically about decentering tech and recentering education, centering education, centering teachers, like mainly centering people and human experience, because education is a human experience, and then decentering tech, because we have not done that and we are not doing that for a while. And thank you so much for also mentioning your the Gateways Initiative. Through the UNESCO UNICEF Gateways Initiative, I'd be curious to know what kinds of collaboration or capacity building have you seen make the biggest difference in low resource settings, or will be making the biggest difference in low resource settings, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, I think this idea of sort of kind of public tech can make a huge difference in low resource settings, because in a lot of those contexts the sort of physical infrastructure of education is very lacking. That the physical infrastructures of schools are nascent, or in some cases kind of falling apart. And but people do often, increasingly do have internet connected devices of some sort. Usually that's a mobile phone of some sort. And so having a place where people can go to participate in public education, um, to me, just it makes perfect sense. Yeah, here we are. We're speaking. The new year just passed. We're in 2026, and it is, to me, shocking how few systems have high quality public digital learning applications, platforms, spaces where, say, seventh grader studying biology, can go to advance, their understanding and interest in biology. It's not at all clear in most contexts where that particular student can go. And I think that, we foresee a future where governments get real serious about, ensuring that there is a sort of trusted spot where people can go to, get those resources that are aligned with the curriculum, that do reflect the um, aims for education. So that is, I think that there is a tremendous amount of innovation that can happen to, develop those public digital learning platforms. And I think part of what's happened with the through the Gateways Initiative is we help countries to share experiences, right? Like a lot of people are experts in their national context and know what's going on, but they don't often know what's happening in other contexts. And that's a real service that UNESCO provides, is we can put people in contact with their peers in other countries. If you're responsible, Fatima, for developing a public digital learning platform in a state in the United States, how interesting to talk to somebody else who's responsible for that in a medium-sized country, or a state in another country, or halfway around the world, and sort of see what they're doing, what they're learning, what challenges they've faced. But I think what we have helped people to realize is that it is possible. It's amazing to me the sort of defeatism that you sometimes encounter, where people who are, leaders of systems of education will sort of go, there's no way that we can build a high quality, platform like this to support
Mhm.
public education in digital spaces. And And I sometimes, you have to remind, like, hold on a minute. You're running an education system that has tens of thousands of schools. You're employing hundreds of thousands of teachers. Those are teachers who are paid, every month. You often run even a whole transportation system to ensure busing of students to get to and from these things. It's an enormous and complex undertaking, so many moving parts. And you cannot build a good digital sort of solution for public education. Like, what are we talking about? And so I think people seeing examples of countries that have done this, it's like, you know what, we can do that, and we can do that really well. There's a great example from Indonesia, and in Indonesia, the former minister of education of Indonesia was like a tech entrepreneur, a sort of almost like a kind of Sam Altman, if you will, of Indonesia, a guy who started a number of very successful um, technology services companies. And anyway, so guy becomes minister of education, and then he's immediately set off to build a platform not for learners but for teachers, because he felt that they were sort of the most important people in education, and he wanted to give them resources to sort of make their job easier, and help them to be more effective, give them resources that they needed. And people were saying, well, isn't this going to be really difficult? And his answer to that was really interesting to me. He's like, oh no, it'll be easier, because I don't have to make any money. I don't have anything I have to sell. All I have to do is to make, teachers happy, and to give them resources and tools that they want. In Indonesia, they made the platform entirely voluntary. So they were real strict about that you never force people to use an application. And you make it so good that they want to use it. And then, after a period of time, can't imagine their life without that, particular application and service. And I thought that's, a really inspiring example that, in a way, public tech should really take off, because you don't have to sell things. And as we were talking about before, with some examples that we have of technologies that do a little bit exist outside of sort of market and commercial logics, like Wikipedia and other things, have actually been enormously successful. Some problems and challenges that we talked about, but by and large, these things can be really impactful and really powerful. So anyway, I'm very excited to see what comes out of some of these efforts. And it's not to say there won't be a really important role for the private sector, but we have seen time and again, if the public option is really good and very solid, then that forces things to be even sort of better, and newer innovations that will sort of come from the private sector. The reality today is that there is, often no public sort of, their public education tends to stop where the digital begins. So the digital solutions for education don't have to be all that good. And I see a lot of applications that are really, it's rote, it's just flashcards, it's not what I would describe as particularly innovative. Not to say there aren't lots of innovations that exist, but some do. But anyway, where is that sort of, trusted option for public education? Why is it that public education stops where the digital begins? Can we ensure that the sort of the aims and purposes of public education extend into online and digital spaces, and that those work, harmoniously and in concert with the important work that happens in person in physical schools?
That's wonderful. Like public education everywhere, there should not be any limit to public education, whether it's offline or online. And I think our audience are going to resonate with you once we, air this podcast, this chat with you. And for the audience, I would just mention this guy that Minister of Education, former Minister of Education that Mark West is talking about. Um, his name is Nadim Anwar Makarim. Is that the person you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. And we hosted one of these, through the Gateways Initiative.
Mhm.
We brought a lot of countries to Indonesia, and Indonesia, very generously talked about their experience, building these public digital learning platforms that were aimed at helping teachers, and mainly to help teachers collaborate. That a lot of teachers are, Indonesians, an archipelago of 17,000 different islands stretching across, um,
Mm.
hundreds and hundreds of miles. It's a huge country, fourth most populous country in the world. And the ability for teachers to sort of collaborate, to share information among themselves was a very welcome development. And as they iteratively developed this platform, they were watching how teachers were using it, and then would sort of steer the platform and more functionality to allow these uses that teachers were were using and seeing. There was another platform that was built for school leaders,
Mhm.
simply, I mean, and it sounds really banal, to order things that they needed. So you need more desks, you need more classrooms, you need curtains for the windows. I mean, things that are actually really important, but tend to not, you don't think much about. Before, that required all of this complex sort of paperwork to ensure that the right processes were followed, and other things. And this app helped us sort of really streamline that. So it was almost like online ordering of different things, and all the paperwork that was required in was sort of automatically done in the background. And school leaders, this was a really made their job so much easier, to be able to do this. So there are these, like, l- often little but really significant things that technology can improve. And I think that's a good example. Nobody is going to say that that is going to transform education, a system that allows school leaders to more efficiently or order what they need. But that's often a major block to to learning and progress in a school. There's a broken window and nobody can get the paperwork to to get a replacement. I mean, that causes real problems on the ground. And if there if technology can provide solutions to those things, fantastic. And I think that that's often the places where I think technology is working best in education. It's kind of in the background. You don't really notice it.
Mm.
It's there, but it's not like the main thing. You don't walk in the school, it's like, let me tell you about AI. It's like, yes, of course there's some AI stuff that's going on, and here's what it does and everything else. But the other aspects of learning, peer interaction, project based learning, the teachers talking and interacting with students, other students interacting with each other,
Mm.
having conversations, that is what you often see with the technology kind of more in the background.
Yes, and it's also interesting to see how, like someone like a CEO of a tech company, uh, going back to like Nadiem Makarim's work in Indonesia, and it also looks like he was a Minister of Education and Culture first, and then he was the Minister of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology, and
the,
someone like him
the,
with a
the ministry was huge. It included all of those things. It was culture, technology, and
research.
education. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And what you're saying is that, it can be done, that you're demanding that public education is centered, that it is given priorities, and it's like online and offline, it does not have those limits. It's possible, like if some if a tech CEO can do this, like with the right intention, anyone can do it with those, those like resources that are in place. And I think this is a great example of like, if you wanted, you could. Like if they wanted, they could. And thanks for highlighting this example. Do you remember the name of the app that they have launched like in Indonesia?
No, but at UNESCO, we're working on a case study to really highlight the name of this. It went under the name of a whole initiative called the translation would be emancipated learning. And then these apps were built under this major initiative, which had a few different branches. But the app was a major undertaking, and not to sort of trivialize what it took. I mean, it required bringing in software architects into the Ministry of Education, having them work alongside The other civil servants who were there, people's, job profiles had to change. It was, it was a major undertaking. It wasn't, I don't think by any sense it was simple to do. They needed to kind of change the conceptualization of what services were being provided, and digital services became a major part of major branch of a Ministry of Education. But
Yes.
I think that I'm find it significant that countries with that I think are doing really cool things with digital learning. It's not like a team of, a little branch team of 10 people. It's like a huge group of people that are working on that, because if you're building, let's say, a really vibrant, high quality public digital learning platform with resources for learners, with probably resources for teachers, and ideally resources for parents and families as well. You know, that is a service, a space that
Mm.
is going to provide, benefits for huge numbers of people, right? Potentially, you know, uh, perhaps even a majority of your population. I mean, huge numbers of people. So the, investing in that, to me, makes a lot of sense. We invest a ton of money in physical schools, and must continue to do that, but let's also have investments so that public education can cross these digital lines. And I think that when we see this sort of ethic of public education reflected in digital spaces, some of the tools and resources are going to look a little different than some of the resources that we have grown accustomed to, that are, they're subscription based. And anyway, they're, the guiding logics can be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, you said ethical initiative, and that's what it is about. And thanks for giving a concrete example of this, because what you're asking for is like demanding that it happens, and if people want it, they could. And the investment doesn't need to be only on like infrastructure and like material infrastructure or like technologies, but also on people. Like we should center investment on people. I think that's what I'm hearing through these stories and examples that you're sharing. And I think I also found the name of the initiative. Uh, I think it's pronounced Mardeka Belajar. I hope I'm
Yeah.
not butchering the name, but
Merdeka Belajar, which is Bahasa for emancipated learning.
yes, so Mardeka Belajar, Belajar. I think emphasis is on Belajar. So that's wonderful. And on that note, since you mentioned AI, and we are really committed to investing in people in the future, we will wrap up this conversation with one last question about um, generative AI and this generative AI dilemma, because a lot of people, and sometimes it includes me, like are thinking of the power of AI and how it's going to change humans, and how humans are going to change AI, and the interaction, human AI interaction. So let's talk a little bit about generative AI and the future of education. Your 2023 paper, you caution that generative AI or Gen AI may deepen rather than resolve educational inequalities. Why?
Well, I mean, that tends to unfortunately be the history of most technologies, that inequities tend to widen. That it need not be that way. That's not written in any way, but that has been the sort of reality, that these technologies emerge. They sort of promise greater equality. I mean, you can only, and it's not to say it's an issue of causation necessarily, but with the beginnings of the internet, there were all sorts of hopes that this would lead to sort of greater equality within countries. In fact, since the 1990s, in many national contexts, inequality has gone way up, often radically up. So you know it requires a lot of care and attention to ensure that technologies do not just widen inequities. I mean, we see this with some of the practical applications of artificial intelligence. I was just in San Francisco over the end of year holidays, and there, you see in the streets of San Francisco, there are a lot of self-driving taxis. I mean, they are there. It is a real thing. It's not the would, could, should, might in the future. It's there, happening now, and it's doesn't take too much imagination to project. Wow, where are we going to be when a majority of cars are self-driving, and then to sort of think that through. How many people's livelihoods depend on driving a vehicle of some sort, and what is that world going to look like if all of those people are put out of work? Is that a more equal and equitable society? I'm not sure. It's going to have to be really carefully managed, a transition like that. So anyway, we know that technologies often widen um, you know social gaps, um, and let's hope that we find solutions to ensure that pattern doesn't just repeat itself with AI. That's not to say that I have this vision. It's often popular to say that these technologies will benefit absolutely everybody all the time at the same time. That won't be the case, but can these technologies sort of help to rise all boats, regardless of where folks are at? I certainly hope so, and I think there's a lot of promising signs that maybe AI can kind of do this. It's certainly put a powerful tool in the hands of a lot of people real quickly.
Yeah, but let's not AI dictate how education is done, right? And you have over and over again emphasized investing in people, investing in public education, and centering teachers and educators rather than circumventing, the entire like teaching system and the,
Yeah,
the
and that's not to say there won't be important roles
Mhm.
for AI, but to again, going back to our objectives of education. If education is the site where we learn to become human, it makes sense to have humans in the loop.
100%. And very briefly, I will talk about this project that we are currently piloting at the University of Tennessee that was pre-piloted last year. It's called Higher Order Thinking with Generative AI, and the reason we have designed this intervention, that I at all thought that it would be helpful, is all of these papers that are coming out from these universities, but also think tanks, describing and explaining and evidencing how not like lack of intention in the use of AI, or just careless use of AI can you know really significantly, statistically significantly impair our thinking processes and thinking capacities. So we are really focusing on higher order thinking, at this age of AI, as it evolves and humans evolve, and we see like evolving interactions between human and AI. And with that, I will ask you my last question, and this is more of a futuristic, your vision focused question. um, if we wanted generative AI to serve all learners, irrespective of their backgrounds, race, gender, culture, religion, creed, whatever that is, not just the elite, what should designers, governments, or donors prioritize right now?
Helping teachers.
Helping teachers. Our audience will be listening. Helping teachers, and how will you do that?
You listen to them. I mean,
Listen
what
to the teachers. Yeah.
what do they need? And listening to teachers also includes respecting teachers. Across the world, teachers are paid a salary that allows them to live in only in poverty. In other places, teachers often go for sometimes months without even being paid. That it's sort of seen in other places as a sort of second job. I mean, that's very sad. That's the future that is that's being built. I'm often struck at how arbitrary compensation can be in our world today. That somehow, like, optimizing the toilet paper is delivered to you through the mail, sort of 30 minutes faster is a, is a super highly compensated job. But teaching, fourth and fifth graders how to read is a very poorly compensated job. It doesn't make much sense. Um, and so valuing, respecting teachers, and then building them tools that will help them to do their jobs. And I think that you know there are some awesome things that generative AI can do to help teachers, also to help students, certainly to help parents as well, and others who are involved in education. But I also see a lot of sort of solutions being hawked and marketed that sort of envision a world without any competent teachers, and that the competent and intelligent and sort of moral, even kind of authority in education will be a machine which is not living, and currently it does not reflect our values. It's a pattern recognition machine, a very powerful one. But I don't think something that many people are super excited to outsource their child's development to. So these are different
Mhm.
junctures and pathways, but I'm encouraged that, look, these technologies are really new. At UNESCO, we're still trying to think through the implications for education, as sort of everybody is. And we tend to get a little overexcited about the sort of potentials of some of these technologies in this initial phase, and then gradually come to understand how these technologies can be more beneficial to us over the long term. I often draw parallels to even things like radio. When radio was first invented, it was a big mess. There was misinformation, disinformation, people spewing kind of hate speech and intolerance, and it was like this big intractable kind of problem. And over time, people gradually developed solutions. Part of that included some regulations, but also part of that included having public options for those things. Public radio was a major and very important innovation. Public radio, sort of the mission statement of public education, is to inform, to educate, and also sometimes to entertain. And having that sort of those options were able to sort of help direct these new technologies in ways that were productive, and help to advance our societies and public and common aims. So I hope we'll be able to do the same with this new generation of technology, but also to sort of be a little bit humble about what it might be able to deliver in education. Some modesty is warranted.
Modesty, humility. You did mention being humble. You did mention being modest about expectations around like what
Yeah,
you can
and
do.
I think what we were talking about, some of these sort of solutions that this you know when Nadine Makarim was minister in Indonesia. I mean, his tech entrepreneur credentials were not questioned by anybody. I mean, he's a household name in South Asia as a sort of tech guy, startup guy. And here he is, minister of education, science, technology, and culture. What does he decide to build? An
Mhm.
app to help teachers, and an app to help school leaders order things they need for the schools. That you know that is that's a pretty modest, like, we're going to take this
Mhm.
this iterative kind of step. And I hope we see more of that, making technology really work for the people on the ground, and then moving on to sort of something else. But at least a lot of the discourse I hear from Silicon Valley is, they've got a distant planet, like in their sights. Better to how do we improve education at this state, at this high school, at this school district, in a kind of iterative way, and let's make it work. and then we can move on to something else, and that may be something as simple as AI assisting the procurement of things that are needed at a school. I'm not sure, but that to me seems like a really kind of cool and promising use. But we would need to talk to people at the level of schools to understand what is going to help them do this very important job a little bit better, and what can technology deliver.
100%. We need more people like Nadim Makarim, it seems like. And your like I wouldn't say wish or desire. I would say your, direction and vision towards, like, public tech, centering teachers, respecting culture, because education is taking place in context. It's not context less, or it's not, context insensitive. So it's taking place in context, respecting culture, respecting teachers, listening to teachers, valuing teachers, and with that, moving forward with, public tech. In this case, I can even, like, I can even envision like public generative AI, like a generative AI or LLM or AI that are co-created by communities, and also governed by communities. So I think, we are really seeing a great, and bright picture of the future, through this conversation. And I do believe in, like, spoken words. Words mean something, and research means something. Of course, as a researcher, I believe that. And I think the more we push for it, the more we talk about it, and researchers, scholars, and policymakers like you, that are doing this kind of important work and talking about it. That's super important. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
this time. I really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully we'll have more conversations like this in the future. Is there anything you want to, like, share with our audience, like one last piece of, or nugget of wisdom from Mark West?
I, Look, I think what you were speaking about there is the importance of having some sort of accountability in education, and public accountability. That's what makes public education to a large extent, is that there is some accountability, to the public. That looks different in different, national and subnational contexts. In the context where I grew up, that meant that there was a school board, and the school board was elected representatives, and they made decisions about that. And people tend to trust institutions where they feel like they have some voice and some representation and other things. And I think that is this nagging sense that we're getting with a lot of our technologies, that we don't have a say, we don't have a voice. We didn't decide this, that this future is sort of being imposed on us. And in the education community, again, instead of just sort of crying foul all the time, and this is a problem and that's a problem, and slow down and hold on, and
Yes.
this could be devastating, or might be, is devastating. Those are important, but also, like, where do we want to go? We do have generative AI. What is the positive vision of what to do with that? And I'm sorry, there is a positive vision. Those tools are absolutely remarkable. It can't just be to totally bury them. I don't think. Um so it's not to say that they're going to be, that you build education systems around them. No, not at all. But what is the positive vision, and then get people to buy onto that vision. But what people won't buy onto is, this is a problem, that's a problem. Then we become scolds, and nobody likes a scold. They like having a positive vision of, this is a sort of a positive future for education, with technology. A final point I wanted to add. I mean, I don't mean to sort of. I mean, I we were hosted by Indonesia, and Nadim Makarim was the minister there. But I do want to say that, like, don't mean to sort of turn this individual into a hero per se. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, a minister is a public servant, and there was a huge team of people that were behind some of these, digital innovations that they have in that country. As I understand, the new minister is taking that, kind of, you know, stepping on those and, working with those innovations and kind of, continuing that, taking those in new directions. I mean, that's the role of government and what, a responsive government is meant to do. Um, but as we sort of come back to again and again in this conversation, I do think there's a lot of sort of exciting things to look forward to with regards to sort of what technology can do for, for public services, and that those will introduce some new solutions, new kind of logics that are guiding those things, that I think can be, really cool, not just for us as individuals, but, for us as communities, as cities, as, school communities and other things. So yeah, I think hopeful about that, and that's needed these days.
Yes, we are hopeful too, and I really appreciate that you raised this important question, that where do we want to go with this technology, like where do we want to go? And that's a question that need to be answered by responsible government. And government is not just one person, as you pointed out. These are people, like government are people, and it includes people from the country, from the communities, from different countries internationally. These are like, a community of countries that are coming together and making these decisions, helping each
Yeah.
other out. Like that's what we want to see. Like where do we want to go with this technology? And our audience needs to think about it as well, because we are part of the same community, even though we are divided by borders and all of that politics. But we are the same people at the end of the day. And I think this question is really powerful. Where do we want to go? Thank you
And
so
I
much.
would, I would add to that, Fatima. I would add to that. That is a very important question, but it's also important to have an answer to that question, to try and seek some sort of consensus to the answer to that question,
Mhm.
and then, by gosh, do it. You know that you need to you need to deliver. We can't. It can't just be deliberation. It is also, doing it and delivering it. And I think that is sometimes, unfortunately, what separates sort of public services from some of the private services. That, there is this malaise that has sort of set
Mhm.
in, that, that would be too hard. We cannot do that. But if people see public services like delivering, that the public education system is doing, important and cool things, that will rebuild kind of trust in it, and trust in government and other things, and that is healthy for all stakeholders. Public, private, doesn't matter, civil society, that's good for everyone. I think that's a development that we can all welcome. But I do want to emphasize, yes, where do we want to go? But, to not let that question sit for too long. I mean,
Yes.
then let's try it out. If the answer is a sort of uh, a, a large language model specifically for education, then let's invest in that. Let's start building that thing, and let's start using it. And, will it be perfect in the first iteration? Absolutely not. But we can improve it and other things. And, that's how you get these amazing private sector, utilities, whether it be Google Maps or something else, right? It didn't start off, absolutely perfect. The kinks have to be worked out, and that will be true of public services for education, public services for, all sorts of different social purposes. But to understand where we want to go, and then, do it and show the public the results. In Indonesia, they had this saying. They talked about. If I'm trying to remember the exact. They had this very nice formulation. It was like, it was something around like change that can't be undone. That, like, if
Mhm.
you build some digital service that is so useful for people, that you can't take it away. It's like people demand it. It's they like it, they use it, it's part of their, day-to-day routine life and other things. And once you do that, it has become kind of irreplaceable, unremovable. And I think once we begin to see some of these, really cool, um, you know, applications of technology for, for public aims, for the common good, we will insist on it. The idea that it could be taken away, people won't want to let go of it. And that was sort of their litmus test, at least in that context, of what does success look like. It's when we have built something that people can't imagine, not having.
I absolutely adore this optimism. And, to summarize, the questions that we should be asking, and what we should be doing. Number one, like, what can we do? Where do we want to go with the technology? Number two, let me use these fingers. Like, number one is, where do we want to go with this technology? And then you're saying number two, we need to ask is,
Build consensus too.
yes, yeah. Asking that question will hopefully bring people together, build
Sorry, I'm
consensus.
just gonna
Number
get the
two,
light. Sorry.
no worries, no worries. Number
My
two,
office telling me it's time to go.
yes. Um, number two is like, what can we do? Number one is, where do we want to go with the technology? Number two is, what can we do? And then number three, let's do it. And I think that's such a powerful message. And I really hope and pray that our audience is listening and paying attention, and also, discussing it and engaging on this conversation. Thank you so much, Mark. It has been such a pleasure to host you on Air Labs Futures podcast, and I hope to continue this conversation in the future. Thank you so much.